Hello and welcome to the Leeds App podcast. My name is Rocco and I'm delighted to be joined by Jonny Cooper. Hi Jonny.
Hello Rocco, nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me on for a nice chat.
Yeah, lovely to have a fellow best-selling author on the podcast at last. It's been a long wait for me, but yeah, it's
I won't go that far, yeah.
Your debut book is, it's had a great start. The reviews are flying in on Amazon and I really enjoyed reading it. It's been, it's a feast of facts and stats, and the whole history of Leeds United really summed up very well by, good hard facts. You can't beat them. But I wanted to first delve into your beginnings, really, of firstly of Leeds United. How did you fall in love with the club? What was the story?
That's a very good question. I mean, I've had a season ticket since 2004. But I went to my first game about 4 years before that. We played Man City when Man City got relegated from the Premier League that year. So that's how long ago it was. But we'd mum and dad won an award in the Yorkshire Evening Post to go and do a stadium tour. So they didn't tell me about it, and then like about a week before, it was, oh, by the way, we're gonna be going, because I've never been to Elland Road before, and it was, we're gonna go to Elland Road, see this game, do a stadium tour, and then watch the match after. So it was like, really, it was crazy. I was only 6 then, so when we went to Elland Road a few days before, just so my dad could like show me where we were going, kind of thing, like drive past it, and it was just like, it looked enormous. Like now I'm like 6'2" and 31. It's like, and go every week or every other week. It's sort of like, it becomes second nature. But when you're 6, it's like, it's huge. You can never forget that first feeling of seeing like the East Stand. Especially, obviously, now we're hoping to develop the stand at some of all the other stands. Yeah. But it would it'll lose that that feeling of how big the East Stand is compared to all the other stands. It's only when you go in the East Stand and overlook because I sit in the northwest corner of my season ticket, and I've done for 20 years. So I just look at the East Stand. But it's only when you're in the East Stand looking at the other stands how small they look, if that makes sense.
It does.
Sorry, that's divulging. It's going completely off topic there, but so that was my first.
It's
quite
an introduction, isn't it? That sort of experience. It's hard to top, isn't it? Did it feel like a bit of an anticlimax when you went back and just as a normal fan, if you like, in a normal seat rather than all that experience?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like doing the stadium tour was amazing. I can remember, seeing all the old shirts and, all the when they won the Fairs Cup and all that sort of stuff, getting to European Cup final, and that's when all of a sudden you want to learn about the great team from the past, and you want to read up on, get all the books about them, and that's kind of what I used to do. All my friends are Leeds fans, or most of them are anyway. Got a few who don't support Leeds, which is terrible, obviously. But most of them are Leeds fans, and we all obviously love Leeds, whereas I've kind of like love Leeds, and also I just want to know everything about the history and who scored the winning goal against Man United in the 1930s and stuff like that, which, is me, it's almost other people, but to me it's really interesting. So that's really where it started. And then getting the Leeds United complete record out of the local library where I lived, and just kept sort of taking that out every couple of weeks and rereading it and reading about all the old players and kind of building up a bit of a knowledge of the Revie era and watching the old videos and all that sort of stuff. The Pain and the Glory video with all the old music over the top of it was I used to wear that tape out. That was brilliant. And all the old season reviews. So that's my upbringing on Leeds when I was a kid.
It's funny because like when I was young, I was the same. I would watch all these old videos of my dad's, which they seemed like like from might as well have been decades and decades ago. But actually looking back now, it was actually just around the corner. But so does that feel the same for you? Like thinking back to the Wilco era, is that like a complete bygone era for you? It's weird for me to think.
Yeah, it would have been when I was younger. Yeah, it would have been sort of like obviously winning the league in '92. I was born in '94, so I came in like the O'Leary era, and then Terry Venables, and been in the Championship for years and years and years. So I kind of missed out on all the good stuff, really. But the Wilco stuff was, you'd be watching the video and it'd be like David Batty getting stuck in. Obviously he came back later, but Gary Speed, McAllister, all those players. But it's strange how even 10 years earlier, it looks old. Football moves on really quickly. Even if you watch Premier League years from 10, 15 years ago, how different the Premier League looks now. I might come on to it, looking at the stats of what I do with my job, but the game has changed so much in 10, 15 years. I'm sure in 10 years' time, we'll look back on the football Leeds are playing this season and go, God, can you remember when Leeds were playing like that? And now, now we're champions of Europe. So
hard to get your head around.
Football moves quickly.
Yeah. So you're obviously into your stats and stuff, and then you landed what would have been my absolute dream job, working for Football Manager, doing the
yes.
Leeds
Yeah,
stats. I mean, that is unbelievable. How did it come about?
So I found out, I think it was one of my friends that told me that he'd seen somewhere they were looking for somebody to do the research for Leeds. So just look at the players and the history and update all the stats, all the facts. So I got in touch with the person who he'd seen online somewhere, that had been Twitter, and I just said to him, like, I would love to do this. Like, I love the stats. You know, I've got a season ticket. I, obsessed over all the games, watch all the highlights, all that sort of stuff. And he said, oh yeah, you sound perfect, and that was it really. Like, there was no sort of process of going through it, of like, a job interview. I mean, I didn't get paid to do that. You got the game free at the end of it, which was still good. But yeah, that was the entrance really. Just prove that you know about football, and then did that for 3 years. Really enjoyed it. Really, really, really fun to, a player suddenly improves from, even from September to January, and you've got to back up the reasons why you've suddenly given him a 15 out of 20 passing rather than a 10 out of passing in the space of a few months and all that sort of stuff. And it is really, it's really, that definitely helped me in my job now of being, of actually putting context behind why I am rating these players on the stats. I mean, the funny story was in 2014 when we didn't sign Ashley Barnes because his stats didn't match up to Luke Varney, and that was my fault. Because I'd rated Luke Varney too highly, so we didn't sign Ashley Barnes.
So funny.
Looking back, it's really funny. That just shows how crazy the time was.
Yeah. Well, I know it's like, it would have been a great signing, but like you look back on it now, and I just think it's hilarious that you denied him having Leeds United on his CV. Like he could have played for Leeds. Yeah, that's brilliant.
I think he was a bit of for want of a better word, a bit of a shithouse when we used to play, Brighton. I think he got somebody sent off when we played Brighton.
Yeah, he did, and he put in a horrendous tackle when he was playing for Burnley on. It might have been Strauch or someone, but yeah, I never liked him anyway, so that's good.
Not a particular, but maybe he's one of them players who, if he was on your team, he would be.
Oh yeah, he'd be a cult hero at Elland Road if he want for you.
Yeah, and we had to put with Luke Varney instead. Scored a great goal against Tottenham, but I was actually there that night where Luke Varney missed against Southampton. Do you remember? It's about a yard
I'll never
out.
forget that.
Yeah,
that's the worst I've ever seen.
I think it has to be. It looked like he did it on purpose.
Yeah.
I think I would have definitely knocked his stats down after that, but obviously not enough.
No.
Football Manager was a big part of me getting to sort of where I am now. And having that sort of mindset for the stats, definitely. Yeah.
So your day job now, Opta. So what do you actually do then, like day to day? Do you have much to do with Leeds themselves, or is it just generally speaking?
We do a little bit with Leeds. We've tried to sort of get them on board with some other stuff that we do, and I still think that we could do a lot more with them in terms of what we've got at work. I've got friends at work who are big Leeds fans as well, who could do similar things, and we send them like match packs now, which are like massive documents where it'll go through our record against, so say Burnley coming up at the weekend, our record against Burnley. Does Scott Parker have a good record against Leeds? Who've scored goals against Burnley in the past? All that sort of stuff. So we send that to them. And they started posting it on their website now. So they'll post like Opta stats ahead of the weekend, which is really good. And they've done that before. I mean, we did a bit first season under Farke, where I was sort of giving them a few stats to put on Twitter, and they were doing that, and it was really good. It's sort of like the stuff that I would do on my own Twitter account.
Yeah.
I was kind of giving to them because, what I've always said to them, and I've always said to everybody, is that Leeds fans love nostalgia, and they love talking about old players, and they love players being compared to old players, and that's what I tried to do in the book as well.
Yeah.
And that's something that I feel like they're probably missing out on a little bit by not using us more. Almost, I'd love to work more with them, and it'd be great. But I want them to start stocking my book in the club shop as well. So if we can sort that out as well after this call, that'd be great.
I know. I'm the same.
Yeah. I can. Yeah, we'll sort it out both
together.
Of us,
but, tag team them.
Yeah.
So I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with stats. I love them. I respect them massively. And like when I write my books, I love, finding these little golden nuggets of, information. So it's a proper thrill. But then it annoys me when people use what's happened in the past, and they think it's just definitely going to happen in the future because, you've seen certain patterns when Leeds were top at Christmas in the Championship. And my dad especially was just saying, well, it's done now, we're up. even though we had to then go and get the same amount of points again. It was like irrelevant. But have there ever been stats that you've uncovered that you're like uncomfortable about revealing ahead of a match because it might jinx Leeds or anything like that?
Yeah, well, last season especially, because obviously we were so near the top and it looked like a foregone conclusion. All season we were the best team. Obviously that was proven at the end of the season. But I think it was after we beat Sheffield United in the 3-1 game, and I'd put on that no team had ever been 7 points ahead of third and not being promoted.
Yeah.
And that you had like 75% of people loved that, and then 25% of people just giving abuse and getting annoyed about it, like you say about the top at Christmas one, which I love those kind of facts, because the thing is you've always got to caveat most of those stats with, yeah, but it's Leeds. So if anyone's going to break that stat, it is going to be Leeds. But yeah, it was funny. Well, one of my friends one of my friend's dad's friends, if I can get around to that. He sees a lot of my stats on Twitter, and he came up to me after that Sheffield United stat, and he was like grabbing me, and he was saying, "Why have you put that on? Why have you put that on Twitter? You should put it on there. It's gonna, it's Leeds. We're gonna mess it up, But I think we hopefully proved last season that we've kind of hopefully put a few of those to bed. Where usually it would be, like you said, the Bielsa season where we'd been top at Christmas. Then I think it's the first time for about 12 years or something where the team didn't go up. But it's just Leeds. What you mean about some of got that love-hate relationship with stats? I think a lot of people do that. But, that's what we're here for, to be shot at and be
absolutely.
Hated.
It's a lot of content as well to get talked about as well, and things like that. It's good. It's good to compare. So getting into the book. I mean, obviously, very knowledgeable guy. Like, did you have to do a hell of a lot of research still? Thinking especially about the very early days. I'm guessing that was a lot of work that went into that, because there's some amazing information in there.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. It was it was a lot of research. Sort of, I think when I started writing the book, I don't know if you're the same when you did yours, but I think I started off kind of just like, I'm just going to write it, and then I'll find the bits after. Yeah. Obviously, this is a stat book, so that was the worst possible idea. So I sort of did that for about 3 days, and I went, no, I need to actually change this, because I was kind of up against a bit of a deadline as well, because I only got approached in January to do it, and then it was coming out in June. I needed to finish it by June to come out in August. Yeah. So it was a quick turnaround, which I didn't know until about April, when Tom at the publishers actually told me that usually it's about 18 months. And I'm thinking, there's no wonder I'm so stressed. Trying to get this to Leeds are trying to get promoted, that's stressful. Trying to write a book, that's stressful. But yeah, so what I did, I changed that, and then once we'd planned the chapters out, I just did all the research. I mean, I've still got all the research on my laptop that I can look back on in years to come, that I put together, and a lot of it formed the basis of, like you say, like the early year chapters, the Revie stuff. Yeah. But at the same time, a lot of it was things that I already knew about, so things that were already in my head that I'd worked out for years. So one thing that went in the book that went out of date on the first game of the season, which is typical, was the players scoring a penalty on the debut. It only happened once ever.
Right.
In 1922, which was Percy Whip. God bless Percy Whip, who scored a hat-trick on his debut as well. And then obviously Nemecha scored a penalty on his debut. So I was walking back into Leeds after the game to get me train, and I'm thinking, I'm obviously delighted because we won the game. I'm thinking there's got to be some stats here around this. And then I remembered that it was a penalty. So I put it on Twitter. And then I was on the train home, and these two guys were just chatting, and one of them just said, "First penalty on a debut for 103 years." And I'm just sat there like, "Hi lads, all right, very, very weird experience to be amongst it." But yeah, so there was sort of like a mixture of, did a lot of research obviously, and then also there was stuff that I knew about and I kind of wanted to expand on, and I wanted to put in there. And obviously there's some stuff that didn't go in, unfortunately, because I was probably got told that, Jonny, it's too niche. It's not, nobody's gonna be interested. So, but yeah, it was a lot of research. It was very intense, but it was very, very enjoyable seeing it all come together. And then obviously winning promotion at the end of it was the icing on the cake.
Perfect, isn't it? Yeah, I never really clicked actually when I was reading it. I never really thought that. Yeah, it could have been a real damp squib if it had not gone up in the end. But yeah.
Well, originally, originally it was, we didn't know exactly how it was going to pan out. When I first got approached about it, it was just, would you write a stat book on Leeds United about the trivia and everything? And then it kind of grew from there. So originally it was going to be on last season. So it was going to be a chapter on each month of the season. And then I'd sort of look at the themes of what had happened, whether it was like an FA Cup defeat, I would then talk about the FA Cup. But then we sort of changed that and went, no, we won't do that. We'll do chapters. The reason we changed it is because it was Leeds and they might not get promoted. Yeah. So we thought, if we don't get promoted, nobody's going to buy a book about finishing third, especially again after what happened the year before. So we totally changed it round and just thought we'll just do 2 chapters on this season gone. Fingers crossed we do go up. If we don't, there'll still be a lot of stuff we can put in.
Yeah.
So that was sort of how it panned out, because it would have been not the best sales figures, I don't think, if it had been just about last season. And obviously there's so much to talk about from the history. So
Definitely.
So, yeah.
Nice when it all comes together then. Just right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's perfect.
But I think my favourite part of the book is the Revie era, obviously because it's the best era of the club. So, I mean, some of the stats that are involved in that era are phenomenal. And when you're reading that chapter, you know, it just absolutely hammers home what an unbelievable side that they were. You know, the records that team broke. Were you surprised doing the research? Obviously, you already knew what an incredible team they were, but you know, did you learn a bit yourself as well whilst doing that chapter?
Yeah, absolutely did. I think because obviously that is probably the part of Leeds United that's been written on the most. I mean, they've got loads of books behind me about it, and obviously the various biographies that have been written. You've written a book about it as well. Obviously, you know, it's everybody's written about it. But one thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to try and find things that maybe people hadn't put in. So obviously I'm looking at it from a statistical point of view. I've got a huge database at work that I can play with. I've got obviously my own stuff. So I thought, what can I do rather than just saying this is what's happened in all the different seasons, in which obviously, you know, everyone's written about. I thought, what can I do that nobody's written? And one thing that I'd always thought was how we were the best team in that era. Obviously, that's the thing that everyone always says, that was the best team. You know, I don't know if you remember the documentary, but I think it's a documentary, more of a program on the 90s called Match of the Seven.
Yeah.
Do you remember? It was I can't remember the name of the guy who presented it. I think he was in a big program in the 80s. But again, I'm too young.
Yeah.
But was and he was just going through each season basically in the 70s, and it's a really great program. Again, that's another thing that got me hooked on football when I was younger. You know, you listen to the players who played against that Leeds team in the 60s and 70s. They always say, you know, I think it's Peter Osgood in the program saying, "Oh, they're the best team we ever played against." You know, ever, and Tommy Smith and people like that. So I kind of wanted to put that into the context and actually looking at the first division table in those 10 seasons when Revie and Leeds were there. We were so far ahead.
Yeah.
You know, in points wise, we just missed out in 2 or 3 seasons in classic Leeds fashion, where obviously finished second, it runners up in the FA Cup, finished second in the league so many times. But actually, if you look at the consistency of that era, finishing in the top 4, 10 seasons in a row, no other team did that. You know, in that era, and no other team did it until, you know, the 90s, Liverpool in the 90s and Man United later on. So, you know, for us to have that consistency and essentially have the same players almost for the 10 years, it was, you know, incredible. And I really enjoyed doing the one stat on each player as well at the end of the chapter. Because it just gave me like a real, there's so like diverse, you know, different players who might play like 3 games, but actually there's always a stat. I always say like there's always a stat on every player that I can probably find. And things like, you know, Colin Granger, who played a few games, made his debut alongside Don Revie.
Yeah.
And he played on the same bill as the Beatles. And he made his debut at Anfield in the same week the Beatles played their first gig or something. And I was looking it up and I was just thinking, this can't be true. I thought, I can't not put that in now. He's called like the singing winger, like that, and it was just like amazing. So yeah, little thing that was something I didn't know before I started writing the book.
I like Nigel Davey, the reserve left back, and he played the whole era pretty much, like just
I know,
as long as anyone else, but he played about 4 games.
Yeah, poor guy. Like I think he got injured quite a lot.
Yeah, he
Nigel
did.
Davey.
He broke his leg. He was
a
left back, and he broke his leg the same day Terry Cooper broke his. It's like when Cooper broke his leg, he would have had a chance to maybe play. And typical luck.
Oh,
yeah.
He had something like 3 years between his first 2 appearances or something, and yeah. But you know, it's amazing. There's a lot of players in that era who stuck around just because they love playing. Obviously, for Don Revie, love playing for Leeds United. Obviously, Mick Bates is the main one, but Mick Bates played nearly 200 games. But you still got players who played 30, 40 games who were there for 5, 6, 7 years, never left.
Phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was very happy that you singled out the European performances as well, because I think that's a big thing that, you know, certainly non-Leeds fans, but even a lot of Leeds fans won't realise, you know, Leeds were the best team in Europe, and like the stats back that up. And, you know, just because they weren't in the European Cup every year, you know, the Intercities Cup, a lot of people said that was the hardest one to win, and Leeds were the first English team to win it. And they were like played more games than anyone else, won more games than anyone else. Like we were, it was like just beyond doubt, wasn't it?
Yeah, and even when we did get in the European Cup that first season, we won 10-0 our first game,
Yeah.
16-0 on aggregate, won the
Yeah.
first 6 games without letting a goal in, and then just came up against an amazing Celtic team. And
Yeah.
and that was like the end of that season where we played something like, 7 games in 20 days or whatever it was, something daft,
That's it.
which wouldn't be allowed now. And
Yeah.
then Revie got fined £5,000 for picking a weakened team.
Yeah.
He had no players, so yeah, it's a strange era.
Yeah, so unfortunate as well. Like, 2 European Cup campaigns. If you just like convert 1 or 2 more of those league championships, second place, yeah, who knows? The whole history of the club would have been completely different. But anyway,
I mean, it is, but it's crazy that. I mean, you look at our European record in general, like over the years, has been exceptional for the seasons that we've been in it. I mean, semi-final European Cup 1970, got to the final, obviously won the final, as we well know, in 75. And then, Champions League semi-final in 2001, having reached the semi-finals of the UEFA Cup the year before. So I feel like when we do get in there, hopefully we get in there again at some point in my lifetime. We do really well, and we have got a really good record. So, but yeah, you're right. It is nice to look back and celebrate that Revie team for what it was playing. In Europe back then, it was only just starting out. It only started in the late 50s. So it was still a new thing, really. Brilliant.
Yeah. So one of the best stats that I found, or what I will say, so like when I was reading the book, I started thinking, like, I wish I'd have wrote it a couple of years earlier, because there's so much in there that I would have loved to, put into my books, and especially because I've just finished writing my latest one about 93 season, and there's a stat in there about we hadn't had a teenager in the team for 174 games until Rob Bowman played against Man U in 93, which I just found that astonishing.
Yeah.
The story as well of what Wilco did to bring that success, just concentrating on the experience in the squad.
Yeah, and obviously that it's sort of like it's split between Wilco having the experience at the start, and then obviously he's created Thorpe Arch.
Yeah.
And then that Rob Bowman making that appearance, all of a sudden it flips then. So all the debut, or most of the debutants after that are all 20, 21, 19, 18. So that's sort of like the turning point of the Wilco era. And yeah, I look forward to reading that. 92, 93 is a very, very interesting season for, just the away record is so bad that year. So there's a couple of missed opportunities where we should have won and dropped points right at the end of the game. That Oldham game, we let 2 in at the end, which you never know, might have psychologically having that one win might have changed things a little bit. But yeah, the home record's good, but the away record's not.
Well, actually, I have to admit I made a mistake in my book, because I thought we'd had the second best record, the home record, sorry, but actually, I saw in your book, it was Norwich. Norwich pipped us. They must have won their last home game of the season to nip into second, but we only lost 1 at home, didn't we? It was a crazy season.
Forest, I think, wasn't it? And they got relegated. So typical. That's typical Leeds. Yeah, that is Leeds.
Don't win away from home in the league, but we win at Wembley, win at the new camp. How'd you write that?
Absolutely. And we still sold our best player as well.
Exactly.
Best players,
I know. Talk about the younger players, and then another really good stat was the oldest team against West Brom, a game that I remember well. I guess it would have been your first season ticket season, would it? Where was it? Maybe the second.
Third, I think.
Was it third?
Third, yeah.
It was the relegation from the Championship, wasn't it? And
that was it.
Like nearly every player was over 30. Well, like 9 were over 29, I think, or something like that.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
I think so. That team was. I mean, it was such a. Dennis Wise obviously trying to start from scratch, almost signing all these free transfers and loanees and trying to get experience.
Torre Flo scored that day, didn't he?
Yes, he did. And then Alan Thompson as well scored a brilliant free kick, which I haven't seen that free kick for years, but in my head it was an absolutely astonishing. He just absolutely belted it into top corner. But trying to find highlights of that season is quite difficult, because obviously nobody really wanted to upload any highlights of the Leeds game, so none of them are on there. If you ever find highlights of that season, it's always like the Luton Town account has uploaded the 5-1 game, or Stoke beating us 3-0, something they upload them, whereas nobody ever uploads any of it for Leeds. Yeah, no, that was a really old team, and like a dad's army almost of players.
I was really surprised to see again in the book it mentions that under Wise, we actually, from when he took over, we would have finished 20th, which I sort of always blamed him for just taking us down, but Yeah,
We can
gained a
still blame
slight.
him. We can
Yeah,
still
yeah.
blame
Let's just blame him. Let's forget. You shouldn't have put that in. Cut it out.
him. No, I'm sorry. No. Yeah, it was, I think, 20th, which obviously isn't brilliant, but it would have been enough.
Yeah,
Because that doesn't mean the start of the season was just such a shambles of conceding late goals. I mean, you look at the team that we had at the start of that season, that could have been a Premier League team had we,
yeah,
fluked it at the Millennium and beaten Watford. We could have been going into the Premier League with Butler and Gregan and
yeah,
people like that. And you just think we would have been the Derby, who
yeah.
were 07, 08, and it would have been Leeds 06, 07 probably.
It's
And we had bet 24 on our shirts and finished 24th and all that sort of stuff. It's just, that was a bad season, but obviously we got League One and we got, Jermaine Beckford and Becchio and Snodgrass and Gradle, all these
yeah.
great players.
Yeah, it's so weird for you to have like your first seasons, and again you mentioned that like 2001 calendar year champions by a distance,
Yeah.
and then to like within 2 or 3 years you're getting relegated all the way down to League One. That's bonkers. Like at your age, were you just so infatuated that it never obviously made a difference to your passion at all?
No, I just loved having a season ticket. Really, I think as well in that first season we still had quite good crowds as well. Even though we just got relegated, there were still over 30,000 every week. It was only like a couple of seasons later where obviously Ken Bates came in and the prices went up and nobody wanted to come and were boycotting sort of thing. That the crowds went down. I think the hardest point probably of supporting Leeds wasn't necessarily in League One because we used to win quite a lot, obviously. I think it was more when we came up and then you had sort of the Warnock,
Yeah,
McDermott, Steve Evans sort of just dirge football really.
15th every season.
Yeah, just it's so. I mean, I remember writing about that in the book, which is called "The Wilderness Years," was the title of the chapter, and I really enjoyed writing it because quite a lot of that chapter is sort of written in quite a sarcastic tone because you couldn't take Leeds seriously in that era really.
Yeah.
Beyond obviously with the promotion and then the first season back in the Championship, great, but after that it's just sort of like it's just laughable really. Apart from Ross McCormack,
Yeah.
you just so many poor players coming through the club, and yeah, I was I think the Steve Evans era was probably my least favourite. I think I was pretty close to giving up a season ticket there, and then my dad persuaded me not to, and then Gary Monk came in and we did well the season after, and that obviously started a bit of the upturn before the great man arrived in 2018.
Yeah, I think Monk definitely deserves a lot of credit. I know obviously he left under a cloud, shall we say, but
Yes.
I really value what he did at Leeds. Like I absolutely loved that season. Like that was the first season where I sort of felt the fire burning again, really. Like you say, it was just it was out, wasn't it? It was completely doused and yeah, we started the comeback, and then Bielsa came in, and obviously another wonderful chapter in the book and in our history. But again, I must say it was the Wigan game that caught my eye, and all 10 outfield players that started the game had a shot. I mean, that's just incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it was an Hernandez had 11 shots that day, I think, or something like that, and it obviously didn't score. We had
Useless.
65 touches in. Yeah, terrible, awful play. But that was just a terrible afternoon. That and then that and the Derby game. The Derby game probably more so because I'd failed my driving test that day as well in the afternoon, and then went to watch Leeds lose against Derby. That's not a good day in my life. But I think the Wigan and the Derby, because they're so close together, it's just like two properly brutal defeats there.
Yeah.
And I think the Derby won because we thought Bielsa was going to leave. I think after that, that was even harder to take. But came back and then won the league and made up for it. But the Wigan game was just you can't write that. You couldn't. If we played that simulation and that again 100 times out of 100, we would win that game. But just on the day, Gavin Massey was just too good for us. And what can you do?
Yeah, they even hit the bar near the end as well. Like, it should have really been 3-1. It's just...
Did they?
Yeah.
I can't remember that.
Maybe they didn't... Oh, maybe they had a Stonewall penalty that they shouldn't have got, but they should have got. Something happened, but anyway. 2-1 was enough. They didn't need to score again. But yeah, Bielsa got us up in the end, obviously, and then it was the COVID season, which, I mean, it's just such a shame. Like, I look back at that and, I mean, that was a crowning glory, and a lot of people... Maybe similar to Wilco, which was before my time, but like people of that era, they value the promotion. They seem to value the promotion even more than the championship win. And yeah, for Bielsa, that first season in the Premier League was so incredible. Not just the fact that we finished ninth, but, how we did it, how we played and the stats suggest, and I've always also suggested that like we should have got in Europe that season. Just little things went against us, the injuries that we had. Yeah, and looking at the stats in the book, that just supports that theory. We were one of the better teams in the division.
Yeah, oh, without a doubt. And I think because it felt like we kind of came out of that COVID period quite quickly in terms of like we went back to the full crowds and whatever, you kind of forget actually just how, like, obviously it was a very miserable time for a lot of people, most people, and the one thing that really during the week or for the end of the week that people look forward to was watching Bielsa's Leeds going toe to toe with the team, with Premier League teams and beating them, and and that was what kept people going a lot of that time in lockdown.
Yeah.
Which is easy to forget. And we had so many, Bamford hat trick at Villa, which is an unbelievable performance. The away game at Everton where we won 1-0. We absolutely battered Everton that day. That's an Ancelotti team, and we should have won about 4 or 5-0.
Yeah.
Some of the chances we had, but, we totally dominated it, and it was just the Man United away game was just brutal, because I remember going into that game, speaking to my friends, saying like, we're going to outrun this Solskjaer team. They don't want to chase us down. We're going to, and then within 3 minutes we're losing 2-0, and it was just brutal.
Yeah,
absolutely brutal.
It's ridiculous because even in that game, like this shows how I felt at the time, because I think we were 4-1 down at half time, and I was convinced that we were going to come back. Like, I actually thought we were going to do it. God, yeah. Ridiculous.
There's so many games again. We're never out of games, even though we could have, we kept sacking and we could easily let goals in at the other end.
Yeah.
But you always felt we would come back and we were going to attack. And I do remember in that season, I think it was Gary Neville was saying, we shouldn't be criticising teams for going gung ho and going attacking, because we're always criticising teams who try and sit back and don't concede any goals. So why would we then criticise teams? And that was talking about Bielsa's Leeds team, because they were sort of changing the perception of how people were. Well, it certainly changed the perception of how I saw football in that time. And you should just go out and attack and try and beat every team. And that was always his philosophy. And just unfortunately, in the end, that we had so many injuries and we just couldn't sustain the same style of football with the players that we had.
Yeah,
was the bleak truth of it, unfortunately. And then the last few games were just obviously horrendous, but he probably would have turned it around had he been given the time and not replaced by Jesse.
I mean, that's what I was going to ask next was do the stats support the theory that Bielsa would have kept us up that season? I mean, obviously you look at the fixtures that we had when he got sacked and the fixtures that we had to come. I think we were playing sort of like 8 winnable matches in a row or something, and players were coming back. Who knows? Maybe they wouldn't have come back. He might have just completely broke them all. What do the stats say? Do they suggest that we would have been all right?
I think the surprising thing was, there's two things. There's the surprising thing that I always looked at was before we played Chelsea at Stamford Bridge in December, we'd only lost 6 of our previous 26 games, I think it was. So it's not like we had loads of defeats and it was like crumbling before our eyes. Like, we weren't losing many games. Yeah. We were sort of in every game, and then it was just, we had that period where we played Chelsea, lost in the last minute, penalty. I was at that game, and then we got hammered by Man City and then hammered by Arsenal in quick succession.
Yeah,
and those were obviously
3 games in a week.
3 games in a week, yeah, and that was really bad. But then you look at the start of the new year, we beat Burnley, and then we beat West Ham. Probably fairly fortunate in the West Ham game. I think they missed a chance right at the end, and then Bowen chested it. Yeah.
I think we still came away with 8 points clear of the relegation zone at that point. Like, we were closer to the European places.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. And this is the other thing is the sliding doors moment, I would say, is the Newcastle game, because Newcastle were bottom. They had 1 win all season. They'd just been knocked out of the FA Cup by Cambridge at home. And you're just thinking, well, if we win this game, we were something like 13, 14 points ahead of them.
Yeah.
Well clear of relegation. That could have easily pushed them further down. They might not have recovered. And I think by the end of the following season, from that game onwards, they'd won something like 60 more points than we had in the Premier League, just because they recovered and so I always think if Melee hadn't have flapped at that free kick, it could have been very different. Or Tyler Roberts hadn't given the ball away at the other end, or Llorente hadn't given the foul away. That's definitely the one for me where I look at. I just think if we just nicked that game 1-0, that had have been 3 wins in a row start of the year. Would have been the best record in the Premier League at that point, and there would have been a bit of breathing space. And you never know. And even in the Villa game, the 3-3 game, we played some great football.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. And even the Man U game. I mean, the last goal of the Bielsa era, that
Yes.
57 seconds from the ball going in the net to it going in the net again. I mean, that was one of my favourite goals of the whole time. And 2-2. I think Dan James missed a free header as well just before they went 3-2 up. I mean, he wouldn't have got sacked, would he, if we'd have not lost that game? So,
No, that's it.
so many
I
regrets.
know. I know. It's best not to dwell on it too much. You'll upset
I
yourself. But we
know.
can always, can always support Uruguay at next year's World Cup.
Exactly. I mean, we don't need to talk too much about Jesse, I don't think. I mean, I
Mm.
did want to talk about Farke though, because obviously statistically, did better than Bielsa. Obviously collected 100 points and all the records that he smashed. I mean, how do you compare the two? I know people don't like comparing the two, but I like it. So what do you think?
Ooh, I think it's difficult to. I think Bielsa's always going to be the more loved manager, without a
Yeah,
shadow of a doubt. I don't think there's any that's ever going to change. But I think they stand alone almost, because obviously Bielsa took a team that was struggling, didn't sign many players, and just the turnaround in the team and the way they played was just incredible. Whereas Farke had a decent team to work with, but has obviously added players to it and
yeah,
rode on and made a great team. And I think last season, there was plenty of games last season where I would have said, if that had been under Bielsa, it would have been the best thing ever. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
But because it was like, oh, but it's still Farke, and I still don't like him, and I still want him to, he's going to be rubbish in the Premier League. We can't play like this and all that sort of stuff. And I just think, just enjoy it. Literally, we were beating teams 7-0, 6-0, 4-0, like
Yeah.
scored loads of goals, like just. You got to enjoy it. I mean, I personally, I love Farke, and I think he's done an unbelievable job, because I think, as well as he still did have obviously a good team that first season, Somerville and Rutair and everyone, amazingly, we had like Sinistera for a few games, didn't we, at the start
Yeah.
of that year, who was just obviously not a very nice man for what he did in the end
Yeah.
when he left, but was just way, way too good for the Championship. And then he had Archie Gray as well. But, what he inherited really in that summer, with all the low knees and all the, people refusing to play and all that sort of stuff. And he dealt with it really brilliantly. And at the time, people were saying how well he dealt with it.
Yeah.
And that sort of, like I said, football moves on really quickly, and people forget things that have happened, and just want everything. Everyone wants everything immediately now. Is the thing, I think. But I think I think he's done a fantastic job.
Yeah, it feels like football, like you said at the start, like it feels like it's moved on a lot even since those Bielsa years. Really, like Farke seems like a very, very typically modern. It's almost like art against science, almost, isn't it? Like Farke built like a machine that was just churning out the wins, and maybe that's what didn't catch the imagination as such, but. Yeah, the job that he did to turn it around. I mean, we were I thought we were going to get relegated that first season back in the Championship.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah,
Go
I
straight
was.
back,
I,
back
well,
down
I
again.
went to Oslo and watched him against Man U, and I mean, he'd only been in the job one day, but yeah, I was panicking after that.
No need to panic.
I know.
Don't watch friendlies.
No, you're right. I mean, getting on to this season, then, like, decent start. Pretty happy with everything, I guess. Stats are looking good. We seem to be in the upper echelons for quite a lot of the important stuff. So yeah, are you pretty relaxed? Are you confident?
Yeah, I think so. I think the performances have been really good, aside from obviously the Arsenal hammering, which you can kind of forgive because you're playing against a world-class team. I don't think anyone expects us to get points at, the Etihad or Emirates or
Yeah,
Anfield. They're kind of like free hits. I think the only concerning thing is we've been in these games, but we've obviously dropped the points against Bournemouth. Should have easily got a point against Spurs. The Fulham game, how on earth he scored that own goal, I will never know in my life. We're over it now, because he's been a great signing.
yeah,
Goodmanson's been really good. So it's obviously just one of those things where a moment of madness. But again, that was a point drop. I don't want to get to like 12, 13 games and be saying, oh yeah, but we played really well in that game, and then we dropped points. So we've lost valiantly, and
yeah,
it's still 0 points. So we need to start picking points up. And obviously the Burnley game at the weekend, there's no, we should be getting 3 points in that. That's top and the
yeah.
bottom of it, really.
It's
But yeah, I've been impressed. I mean, the Everton game was just crazy. I
superb.
was not expecting that first half at all. It was
Yeah,
just amazing. The atmosphere, everything was just brilliant. And then getting the late winner was icing on the cake sort of stuff. But yeah, again, the Spurs and Bournemouth games. I think in those two Premier League match days, the last two, we've had the second most shots on target of any team over those 2 match days. So, we are looking good going forward.
Yeah.
Again, my only concern about Calvert-Lewin is that he's a very good centre forward, but he's not brilliant in front of goal, as the stats back up, unfortunately, in terms of his people don't like XG and things like that. But it is something we do measure players on the finishing, and he has been one of the worst finishers in the Premier League over the last few seasons. But at the same time, his all-round play has been excellent. So it's kind of like you've got to weigh it up. If he could finish and score 25 goals, he'd be playing for Barcelona.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly.
That's it, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, I've really liked him so far. Yeah, it's frustrating that should have more goals, but I don't know. I feel like maybe it'll come.
I'm
not
hope
just
so.
writing him off as a non-goal scorer. I mean, the header against Wolves was just so good, wasn't it?
This is it. Like, he scored that header against, which was the hardest chance he's had so far, probably. And he's put that in amazingly. You're thinking, God, you've scored that. Please, the Sheffield Wednesday misses were just unbelievable. Yeah. And even the penalty wasn't brilliant either. And that was slightly, that was concerning. But then he's putting that header in against Wolves, and it's like, when was the last Leeds striker who would have scored that header? Do you know, like, who was no offence to Piru, but, he was a great finisher, but I can't imagine him
Viduka,
getting Viduka. Viduka probably would have been in the one, or Trezor Campbell maybe with his aerial prowess to get over to it. So from that point of view, he is a top, he's an England international striker. But his finishing's not great. But we've got other players in the team who need to chip in with the goals as well. So.
I was going to ask you about XG. What do you think about it? Like, I don't know. I'm so skeptical. I'm surprised that it's so prominent in the modern game, like that it gets talked about so much, because I don't know. There must be a lot of holes in it. Rebounds, things like that. If you if you air shot when you've got an open goal, it doesn't count. Things like that. I mean, what do you think about it? Do you respect it? Do you pay a lot of attention to it?
Yeah, well, of course. Well, we obviously, where I work, I'm using it every day. So I think for me, it's just kind of like normal.
Do you think all those sorts of things even out in the end then? It
I think it's a good way of, I don't think it's a good way of doing it for maybe a single game necessarily. If you're judging a team, for instance, right, you need to use it over, context is everything in stats. I always say that you've got to have the context behind it. And I think with XG, people get really bogged down with like, stop banging on about XG and all that sort of stuff. But it's just an extra layer on top of shots and shots on target. So what would have been 20, 25 years ago at Euro 2000, for instance, stats flash up, they've had so many shots on target, but we can actually put, the XG might be really low because they're just shooting from 30 yards out.
Yeah.
And, and hitting the target, but they're not really looking like scoring. So it's just an added layer on top of, and people say, use it all the time. When they look on the phone now, you go on FootMob or SofaScore, it'll say XG. Sky Sports, who we work really closely with, and every time it's halftime stats, they'll go through the stats and they'll talk about XG, and they use it on Match of the Day and everything like that now. So it's just it's everywhere. That might be why people don't like it, because they feel like it's being shoved down the throat or whatever it is. I don't know. But yeah, for me, I mean, it's a good way of measuring a team's performance, and it's here to stay. So
yeah, well, I would say that I think the good thing about it for me that I like is that, like, the amount of times where people say, he has to score that, when it really isn't the case at all. In reality, you probably score it 1 in 5, and the XG supports that. Even when Leeds beat Cardiff 7-0, people were saying, it should have been 10. Well, it's like, come on, we scored 7 goals, like.
It's the classic thing, isn't it? Like, it would have been, it would have been 12-0 if you'd have scored all 12 shots. It's true, but it doesn't happen in a game. Defenders get blocks in, and goalkeepers are there to stop shots. So but it does. The XG is obviously, if it's 0.2 out of 1, it's 20% chance that a player scored, and that's measured against thousands of shots over a number of years that we've got in the database to back that up. I know some people, you're always going to get people like Erling Haaland who are just going to outscore XG.
But that shows what a good striker is, I suppose.
Exactly. But then there are strikers who might outscore it for a bit and then revert to norm after a while, because they've just had a really good spell of scoring.
Like Calvert-Lewin a few years ago.
Calvert-Lewin, there you go. Patrick Bamford, all these England number 9s. It's just another metric of measuring the game, and I think, like I say, you've just got to put everything into context. It's so important.
I'll get off its back then.
No, it's fine. No, you can.
Nice. Do you want to give us a prediction for the Burnley game then before we go? What do you reckon? Such a big game.
I'm going to say, so Burnley have, obviously they only let 16 in last season in the Championship, but they've let 15 in already. So if we score, we'll have already equalled what they conceded last year, which is crazy. So I'm going to say 2-1 to Leeds.
Nice.
There we go.
We
had
the same prediction from Isaac Johnson and me, so we're all
great. We're all aligned.
We're all aligned. Nailed on then that we're going to lose 3-0.
Yeah, please don't blame us when we lose. Crikey.
Great. Well, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thanks for coming on. Like I say, really loved the book. Where can everybody buy it?
So you can get it on Amazon. Sometimes I've got an offer on Amazon at the moment. It's terrible. I'm getting abused for people saying, "Why is it £11 when I paid £20 for it?" I don't do the prices. I just write the book. But yeah, so you get it on Amazon, Waterstones, Asda as well. Asda are selling it, which is nice. So yeah, get your shopping and get your book.
I don't think I've even mentioned the name, As Leeds Go Marching On, it's called. And
there
it's brilliant.
Go. Yeah, that's it. Oh, yeah, thank you, mate. Thank
absolutely.
You.
There's some books that are like vital collection items in your, if you collect Leeds books, you need that book in your collection for sure. Because as you say at the beginning, either reading it page to page or just like dipping in and checking, eras or certain things, it's great. It's going to be very handy for me if I ever try and do something on the John Charles era. So thanks in advance.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. Very welcome. Put me in the bibliography.
Of course. All right,
Thank
Jonny.
you very much.
Cheers.
Oh, nice to speak to you. Thanks a lot.
And you.